Hi everybody, Dan Illman, Matt Bernier. DRF Saturday Race of the Day is the Grade 1 Whitney Stakes, part of the Breeders' Cup Challenge Series. It is a win and you're in for the Breeders' Cup Classic. Matt, let's take a look at this field. $1.2 million is the purse. They're going to go 1 1/8 at the Spa. We have a field of 8, and 2 New York breds fly the flag for the Empire State as your morning line favorites. The 6 Diversify at 7-5, and the 4 Mind Your Biscuits at 2-1. Let's begin with the speedy Diversify. He's one of your favorite horses in training, Matt. He exploded to win the Grade 2 Suburban last time out, but that's not the only big race he ran. Last year, wire to wire in the Jockey Club Gold Cup. On his best day, he is capable of being one of the fastest horses in the country.
Yeah, it really is. And really, to me, this is kind of an important race for Diversify because this wasn't initially the plan all along. Rick Violet had talked about waiting for the Woodward at the end of the meeting and not running him here in the Whitney. To me, this is a spot where he looks like he's controlling speed. He's probably going to have a little bit of company on the front end, but you have to look at him and say, if he replicates that Suburban, he is strictly the horse to beat. The question becomes, do you think he's going to replicate that, or do you think there might be a scenario where we have a little bit of a bounce candidate?
Let's talk a little bit about the pace situation in the Whitney, and we'll throw up the Timeform US pace projector. And of course, it has Diversify out there on the early lead, but the number 3 Dalmore is not too far behind. Dalmore made the pace last time out in the Grade 3 Cornhusker handicap at Prairie Meadows and was no match for the local wonder horse, Remembering Rita, in the lane. I guess this horse can improve second off the layoff. It's hard to imagine him winning a race like the Whitney, but do you think he's going to try to take the race to Diversify early, hurting Diversify's chances?
It sounds like the connections are intent on that, but it sounds all well and good. I'm not convinced he's actually fast enough if Diversify wants to go. Now, that's really where the interesting sort of chess match begins, because Diversify has shown in the past that he doesn't absolutely have to have the lead. So I think if Ricardo Santana is intent on making the front on Dalmore, I think Diversify is going to be fine sitting just off the flank and basically using Dalmore as a target and then trying to take over, rounding the far turn.
The number 4, Mind Your Biscuits, arguably is the most naturally talented horse in this race. He has 8 triple-digit Beyer speed figures in his career, and that's not counting his 2 victories in the prestigious Grade 1 Dubai Golden Shaheen. 2 question marks for Mind Your Biscuits. 1, the distance. He's stretching out to 1 1/8 for the first time. He's always been known as sort of a 6 furlong to 1 mile horse. 2, Saratoga. His lone flop last year came in the Grade 1 Forego Stakes, and there were reports leading up to the Forego that he didn't handle the Spa at all. We'll have to see what he does on Saturday, but if he runs his best race, he's going to be right there.
Absolutely, because you also have to factor in he's going to have a little bit of tactical speed on the stretch out. He's going to be closer to the pace than he probably normally is in those sprint races. Look, I'm concerned with both of the things that you brought up. I think Mind Your Biscuits, you can make the case that he is the most talented horse in this race, and really he's accomplished just as much as most of these runners, if not more. But the 2-turn try for the first time, that to me is a major unknown. It's not so much that I don't think he can do it, but until he does it, I don't really want to find out at a short price and start 23 that he can't handle 2 turns. And then also, you brought up the racetrack. I think that's something that a lot of people have forgotten. He didn't, for some reason, one reason or another, didn't love Saratoga last year, the main track. He trained well over at Oklahoma, the training track, and I know he's won a race at Saratoga in the past, but to me, he kind of has to prove that he's over the racing surface and he's going to be able to handle it.
The 2 Backyard Heaven walloped last year's Kentucky Derby winner Always Dreaming and Good Samaritan, who we'll get to in a little bit, in the Grade 2 Ali Sheba 2 starts back, then bombed as the odds-on favorite in the Stephen Foster handicap. Now, I guess there were 2 ready-made excuses for the Stephen Foster. It was an extremely hot and humid night. Poor Irish Warcry couldn't even make it around the track, and he was chasing a very fast pace as well. But as president of the Backyard Heaven fan club, I've always had concerns about him when he gets past 1 1/16. I think a good trip is coming. I'm not sure about the 1 1/8.
No, I agree with you 100%. The Foster, like you say, whether it was the hot, humid night down underneath the Twin Spires or whatever else the case may have been, if you want to give him the benefit of the doubt there, that's fine. I was concerned exiting the Ali Sheba about his ability to get 9 furlongs because he popped back to his left lead at the end of that race, and that was at 8.5 furlongs. If you think that 9 furlongs isn't a problem, that's fine. He's a major player in here. I have to be honest, I also question what was in the Foster as a whole. I'm not entirely convinced that was a super strong Grade 1 race. And again, Backyard Heaven, if he runs his best race, absolutely can win. Usually, you and I have talked about it. Boy, it's difficult to trust a horse off of such a poor effort most recently.
Breaking from the rail and flying somewhat under the radar at 6-1 on David Aragona's morning line is the #1 Taprit, last year's Belmont Stakes winner, who has had 2 starts already at 4. And interesting to note, both of those races came with an aluminum pad. Taprit has been battling foot problems. He is listed as racing with an aluminum pad off in the Whitney. He might be feeling the best he's ever had since last year's Travers, and we know distance is no issue for this horse.
Yeah, not at all. If anything, he probably wants a little bit more distance than this 1.125 miles. I think he's just a little bit of an interesting horse in here for a few reasons. You brought it up. He ran so well in the Belmont last year, winning that race. And then I didn't think he ran poorly in the Travers. I think a lot of people just immediately assumed it was a terrible effort from him. I thought he ran okay, all things considered. Then he was gone for a long time. You brought up the aluminum pad. That first start off the layoff at Belmont, he was up close to a pretty hot pace. And look, he got a little bit tired at the end. I'm not going to hold that against him. He came back in the Suburban, and you want to talk about wider than wide. Turning for home, he was about 10 paths off the rail, and he just kind of plugged along at the end. To me, I think there's a scenario where he works out a little bit of a better trip in this spot. I don't think Saratoga is a problem. And look, if you do have any concerns about the foot issues or the feet problems, clearly your little piece of information there, that certainly would help at least alleviate some of those concerns.
Mind your biscuits, perhaps the distance too long. A Good Samaritan last time in the Met Mile, perhaps a little bit too short. We remember he was a course and distance winner last year in the Grade 2 Jim Dandy, beating 2 classic winners in Always Dreaming and Cloud Computing. Good Samaritan's run some decent races since then, but he's never really gotten back to his top form. He needs pace. He might get it.
He might get it, and I think he's going to need it. That's the only concern, is that if it doesn't develop and the pace doesn't materialize, is he way up against it and he has to settle for a minor award. I also found it a little bit intriguing that for a little while there was chatter coming out of the barn and for the connections, the ownership group, that Yoshida may run in this spot as opposed to Good Samaritan. Instead, Yoshida goes next week in the 4-star Dave. Good Samaritan on his best day, he can certainly be a threat in here. I just don't know where he is from a form standpoint.
McCracken beaten a dirty nose in last year's Haskell Invitational, has always hinted at potential, but it seems like he's just stalled in the mid-90s from a buyer standpoint. We have horses in this race that regularly run triple digits, and Diversify's coming off a 110. McCracken needs to improve.
Certainly needs to improve. You can make the case that he's just not as talented as some of these horses. I'm also going to make the case that distance is not his friend. To me, I would like to see a nice sort of finish from him on Saturday afternoon and turn him back for a race like the Forego at the end of the meeting.
Discreet Lover, often overmatched, dances every dance. You got to give this horse credit. He's banked over $800,000 in his career. He picked up a Grade 2 placing when a well-beaten third behind Diversify last time out. I think you just take him back, make one run, and hope for the best.
He's another one of my favorites in here, and oddly enough, after start 41, he's paired up career buyer tops of 98. I don't know that you're going to get a forward move, but he's the kind of horse, if you're playing any sort of a horizontal, maybe he's one that you want to throw in.
Let's take a look at our top selections for the Breeders' Cup Challenge Series race at Saratoga on Saturday, the Whitney. I've always been a big fan of Mind Your Biscuits. I believe that he can get the 1.125 miles with the right trip. The price is not appealing. I think you've got the right value play on Taprit. Again, he just is sneaking under the radar. 3rd start of the form cycle, aluminum pad off, and you got the great Todd Pletcher in your corner.
And to be honest, that's really what this race boils down to for me. I respect the 3 main contenders in here, Diversify, Backyard Heaven, as well as Mind Your Biscuits, but I can make a little bit of a question for Diversify coming back. This wasn't initially the plan, although I think it's a positive that they're going to wheel him back sooner than they thought. Mind Your Biscuits, I think he's one of the more likely winners, but just again, at such a short price, I don't know. I don't want to find out that 2 turns isn't really what he wants to do. And Backyard Heaven, what happened down at Churchill, at least with Taprit, maybe you're going to get a little bit of an inflated value, a little bit of an inflated price. And I think maybe 3rd off the bench for Todd, you get the best effort from him.
Matt's going with Taprit. I'm going with Mind Your Biscuits coming out of the Key Race Met Mile. I'll go 4, 6, 1, and 5 in the Grade 1 Whitney. Again, part of the Breeders' Cup Challenge Series. It's a win and you're in for the Breeders' Cup Classic. You can catch Matt and all the gang on NBCSN at 5 p.m. Eastern on Saturday. Best of luck.